Hello and welcome to the Net That Haul second episode of the preseason. I'm FPL Nima. I'm joined by FPL Mariner and FPL Lens. We're here to talk about key strategies today in FPL. So we're going to cover some interesting topics for you all. We're going to look at kind of team structure. We have a few drafts ready. We're going to look at fixture swing blocks, building team value, and then Gabriel's going to cover the matchups for 4 more teams to add to last week's preseason episode. So while you're here, please do hit like. Thanks for joining in live. We'll give a few shout outs shortly. And hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. But morning to you, Mariner. What time is it? Just to timestamp this.
5:36 a.m. in Manila. The wife's running around in the background. We're just feeding the baby.
The commitment to the cause I see. And Gabriel, good afternoon to you as well. I know you're just halfway through your day.
Yeah, good afternoon. 2:37 here in a hot summer afternoon here in Phoenix, Arizona. Nice to see you all.
Nice. So just before we get going, I'm going to give a quick few shout outs. So Kevin Rose at FPL_Safa, a YouTube member. Thanks for being a member and supporting the cause. He can't join live, but he wanted to come in and get a message just to ask our thoughts on the 5 sub rules and do we need a deep bench? If so, because there's going to be more 1-point cameos from our starting 11. So we'll be sure to add that to the end when we do the live questions. We have one from Shayan. Good to see you, mate. Chilwell or James. Squeak from Rubber Ducky. Shams, good to see you, mate. We got Andy Martin, who's arrived just after above average. So big night of FPL content consuming for you, my friend. Idrissa will also remind us at the end to cover the Neto or Wissa question regarding who might be more nailed. Good to see you, Charles. Donny as well, another one of our YouTube members. Good day to you, mate. FPL Chips, nice to see you back. I'm just checking if there's anyone I've missed. Flying Pigs says, hi guys. Ronaldo FPL, good to see you. And let's get going. Yeah, I guess we did cover some stuff last season. We looked at our season reviews, but now we're just going to look ahead. 21-22 is over. But I'm just going to give one final shout out to the #1 FPL YouTuber in the FPL content space, FPL Mariner, who finished 122nd. I'm really proud of him. I know he's not at home, but he has a similar trophy to this lying about somewhere. But yeah, we're gonna milk that he was the #1 ranked YouTuber in FPL last year, and let's see if we can get 2 more top 1K ranks or 3 1K ranks between us.
With no beef, Nima, no beef.
No. The thing you have going for you is that it's true, so that helps. That works in your favor.
Facts help. I just want to say, Robert Ducky, so I know before you could see the number, it did look like maybe I was wearing an Henry shirt, but I will have you all know who are listening on podcast, I'm wearing the 1998 France World Cup, Brazil final match, Zidane 10 shirt with the collar. So thank you to Amarino on Twitter who kindly gifted this to me. What a great guy. And I had to absolutely wear it. It's like one of my favorite shirts of all time.
Ironically, I'm wearing a Brazil shirt, a Brazil t-shirt.
And I promise, guys, this wasn't coordinated. Good to see you, Steve, or Stay. I hope Steve is right. It might be Steve. But yeah, I'm going to get the content up on screen for everyone. And we'll just get going. So I've tried to put the Lego bricks for the team structure today. Let's see what else I can do over the season. I might put some reaction shock faces when someone has a bad game week. But let's get started with the FPL Lens philosophy of the week. Why don't we?
All right, the FPL philosophy of the week comes to us from Jack Kerouac. So during the off season, our minds, we seem to wander into real life. And Jack Kerouac, named Jean-Louis Lebris de Kerouac, he was one of the parents of the beatnik movement here in the United States, and very much about taking the road. He was the author of the Dharma Bones and On the Road. So his quote is, I realized either I was crazy or the world was crazy, and I picked on the world, and of course I was right. So how does this relate to FPL? I'm looking at Mariner here just to see his mind go blank for a second. But this relates to FPL for me just because right now there's a lot of content being generated, and we're in the process of ourselves of learning the lessons from last season kind of changing maybe a little bit in how we play the game, or in our identity within the game for next season. And we're all in that time of transition. And I think of picks like last season, it was a highly owned pick like Luke Shaw, right? The season before it was Timo Werner, and there are these picks that where they get into your mind, right? So it's just a reminder to kind of trust the way you play, trust the way you want to play the game, trust the decisions you want to make, whatever plans you want to make. Trust that and filter the information you get from content creators like us through that filter of your own discourse and of what you think is right.
I think it applies to life as well, but don't they all?
That's kind of the point.
I love this. I do love the new graphic this year with the ocean and the expanding sea. So nice idea. I guess, yeah, this is definitely relevant for me last year. I don't know about you, Mariner, but I think we both took some slightly different chip strategies compared to the world or the masses. And there was a lot of times where it felt like everyone else was about to have this incredible week using chips on weeks we weren't. And I just had to trust the course and keep steering that ship and not kind of jump off the boat panicking because everyone else was doing something else.
I don't know about trusting the course. I was bailing out rapidly.
You were taking hits just to get Timo Werner in as fast as you could.
I was bailing water out faster than my little arms could do it.
I guess we've got Robert Ducky as well saying we should avoid Salah because the world is picking him. So I'll have you know, official FPL, the app actually put out a message just earlier with the 10 most owned players in fantasy so far. And Haaland was on 64.5% ownership, which was higher than Mohamed Salah at 60.6%. The rest of the top 10 consist of Trent, 57%, Perisic, 49%, Cancelo, 45%, Jesus, 44%, Reece James, 42%, Luis Diaz, 30%, and good old Sam Greenwood, the 4.5 million forward enabler, at 26%. Who would have known? But yeah, it looks like defenders are in vogue. So I'm sure we'll get to the defenders when we move to the team structures as well. So let me just get the team structures back up on screen for everyone. So this is another kind of, I guess, Lego brick, Mariner. I don't think it's as colorful as mine, but I'll forgive you. Cool. So this is from Fantasy Football Fix, isn't it, Chris? Do you want to maybe talk through a little bit? I know this is something that you really enjoy looking at every preseason.
Yeah, sure, I will do. Okay, so this is about the team structure. So I think the simplest thing to say is, what are the golden rules that we have to look for when we're putting a team together? The game's new and launched, and we can't wait to get into it. So once we've done our auto create team and gone for our low ranks, Nima, like apart from people like me who were asleep, of course, and end up with a 90,000 one. But there we go.
It's a good start. You're ranked at top 100k to start the season. Unlucky, mate.
Yeah, anyway. So, right. Well, so what are these golden rules? Well, the first thing really is create a team with a spread of price points. I heard them described last year on All About Cheating as price islands. I think that's a brilliant term because you need to be able to jump from one to the other without taking hits, without getting your feet wet, or without, that's the thing. We don't want to be taking hits at the early part of the season. At the end of the season, when we're chasing, bailing out rapidly, then maybe, hits are warranted. But at the start of the season, we really want to be very careful. So avoid the scenario when you need to be making like 2 transfers to get onto a player or a price point. And interestingly, if you look at forwards last year, we were quite flat across forwards because there wasn't a great deal of option. That was a problem. So if there had been a premium forward that had popped out quite quick, we'd have had a hell of a challenge getting onto him. Obviously, there's more premium forwards this year. Keep 0.5 in the bank. Don't just use that extra 0.5 for the sake of it, because once the price rises start to take effect, you could get priced out and then have to take a hit to jump on that emerging asset. So it's easier to go down in price than up as well. And then, differential wise, and Nima, you mentioned the tweet earlier about the percentage. Now they'll settle, won't they, as we go on? But we don't want that many differentials in our side to start with. Go with the pack. You can't necessarily win FPL in game week 1, but you can pretty much, or in the first 5 weeks, but I think you can lose it. So, the template is stay a little safer and stay with the pack. Maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 differentials. We'll talk about I talked about combinations last week, didn't I? About having maybe combinations as differentials as well. One of my drafts at the moment has Salah and Diaz, for example.
I like that. I guess you could see the alternative of maybe Trent and Robertson, but I definitely think that for me personally, I'll be looking to start the season with 3 Liverpool players. It's just deciding whether it's double attack or double defense.
Yeah, exactly. And double attack would be a differential, right? So, because I think there's more likely people are going to go double defense than double attack, I would think. But anyway, so if we could just look through this, so what we're really looking at. So we've got obviously how did the all-time top 50 set up? On the left-hand side, we've got the top 50 managers for the season last year. How did they set up? Then in the middle, we've got all-time top 50. Set up their game week 1 team last season, and then there's me on the right. So obviously with my 122 rank. So I think the first thing which I would say is if you look at these boys, and please feel free to jump in, they look remarkably similar. There's 1 or 2 little nuances, but pretty much everyone, the template was again I think fairly strong, and I think the way that the teams were built up last season were fairly similar. I think the issue again is about the flatness up front. But what do we see? Well, we see not a massive spend on goalkeepers. Now, the maximum budget really looks like about 9.5 million for goalkeepers. That's low. So obviously this year we've got some 5.5 million options. I think Nima, I'll let you have a rant about FPL in a bit, but I think the one thing they have done, I think, is they've given us some challenges about thinking about goalkeepers because the pricing's a bit lower. I think it's the first time for a while.
I think they're very focused on stopping the drop-off mentally of like more casual managers. So obviously, if you have superstars in your team, household names that and you're watching the football matches every weekend, you're more likely to keep logging back into FPL if you can afford more of those superstar names. So as soon as, goalkeepers like Mendy cost 5 million, it leaves a lot of money for you to spend on the kind of more attacking players that you're going to be excited to watch. So I definitely think they're catering more to the masses, and we're sometimes in a Twitter bubble and we worry about kind of template and going against it. But what we don't realize is maybe 1% of the total player base are on Twitter. So yes, there may be a Twitter template, but it's not necessarily the same as what the 9 million players are going to do. I think what's interesting about last year is it was probably one of the first seasons I know, Gabe, I don't know if you can recall any, where the template started out so strong out of the blocks. I don't think it's necessarily always like that.
I'm trying to remember how template were players like was the double up on Antonio and Ben Rahma, for example, last season. I don't know if combinations were template, but maybe certain players may have been template. But I do want to go back to that goalkeeper conversation because I disagree a little bit on the perspective of the motivation behind the goalkeeper pricing. I actually think at 6 million, the goalkeepers weren't even the premium goalkeepers weren't even part of the conversation, because defenders that had maybe, even if it was remote, but some potential of attacking returns and maybe even more potential of bonuses, when you could get them at the same price of 6 million or even at 5.5, I think that FPL in this case, they want us to make a decision. Are you going to go, like, I think a 5.5 for a absolutely nailed 90 every single match, like Ederson, for example. And like Liverpool, I think is different because you have Trent and Robbo, but in City you have Cancelo, who's most likely nailed. Other than that, like, where are you gonna go? You might, like, if you want to go 3 City, I think Ederson at 5.5. It'd be like, imagine a defender at 5.5. That's if Cucurella doesn't go to City, right? Because if he goes to City, then the decision is made for us. But I think pricing these goalkeepers at 5.5 forces us to make a decision, and we'll also see this average goalkeeper money spent on goalkeeper go up a little bit, because I think that pricing will entice some people. I'm certainly considering it, playing around with the idea in my head.
I think it's a good point. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Gabe. Actually, I think I tend to agree with you. I think it's brought the discussion in for players like Mendy. You know, clearly, if you want double Chelsea defence, you know, it's 5 million is good. I mean, even Edison, look, you know, he's nailed. You know, where are you going to find a nailed City asset from at 5.5? You know, I think that's the key. So I think it might change the template. The trouble is then we've got to then try and shoehorn everybody else in as well, haven't we? That's the other problem. So at the moment, I don't know about you, but I'd be interested to know what the lads and lasses in the chat are saying. But you know, I'm actually on 8.5 million goalkeeper spend right now. So you know,
so am I. I think the most I would go to is 9 million, because Mendy just seems like an opportunity I don't want to pass up. I guess one thing I do want to say though is something that's going to be interesting this year, and just talking about the what's new that I promised I would cover, which there is no slide for, but I'm just going to sprinkle it in as we go, is obviously because of the way that the chips are going to fall, and you have to use the first wildcard by game week 16 before the World Cup. You then have unlimited transfers before game week 17 after the World Cup, and then you have to use your second wildcard before game week 38. I'd like to look at the season in 4 quarters, and I think I can be more aggressive in the first kind of 5 to 10 weeks, because I'm likely to use the wildcard then. The closer to game week 16 I use that first wildcard, the less value I can imagine, because I'm then going to, like, if I use it in 15 or 16, I'm going to get unlimited moves the week or two after anyway. So with that in mind, I'm going to be really focused on the fixture difficulty blocks that you're going to cover later. And I'm going to go really hard, because I think there's so many value 4.5 million defenders as well. It's hard to know which one to go for. And because the premium defenders are also quite well priced, and so are the goalkeepers, we might end up not getting many of the 4.5 defenders, but they could also be incredible value. So I feel like you almost have 4 opportunities this year to find where the real value in defense and goalkeepers are. So I'm not so kind of worried and concerned about, say, starting with Mendy or, you know, starting with certain defenders, because I know that when I see them start to keep a few clean sheets, it'll probably be by then that I'm in a wild card anyway, and I'll then have my second pop at getting the right goalkeeper or the right defenders, and then the World Cup will happen. I'll have a third pop at it. So I feel like there's going to be a lot more opportunities with the way the season almost feels split into quarters here. I don't know if you guys would agree.
Well, you'll also have a bit more money, won't you? That's the other thing. So at the moment, you know, we're starting 100 million. By the time we get 8 or 10 weeks in, we could have 103 million. So we've got 1.5 more million to spend. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's an element of that, but I do like the idea of this guy. I think the one thing they've done right, and I don't think they've done much right, but I think the one thing they've done right is bring the goalkeepers in, for sure.
Mariner, if I could just touch on that point really quickly here. The last thing I'll say is to counteract the point that I just made. It's much easier for a 4-5 defender to go up in price, in value, than it is for a 5-5 a goalkeeper, than it is for a 5-5 goalkeeper. So if you go in on say like a Raya and he has a couple of good games, you could make some money on Raya, whereas someone like Ederson, you're probably safer, you probably won't lose money, but you may not make money on that early on.
That depends on their ownership as well, doesn't it? They only need 2 or 3 bad weeks, and then of course then they start losing money as well. We've seen this with with the 4 million goalkeepers, haven't we? You know, if you go for a highly owned 4 million keeper and then people jump off him, he'll drop down in price. But anyway, shall we keep going?
Yeah, let's go into the teams just before we do a couple more comments in the live chat.
I just wanted to very quickly talk about the defense wise. You can see, obviously, I'll whiz through this, guys, because I'm mindful of time. But defense wise, the format of should we say the template last year was roughly around 3 assets around 5 million or below, and of course we had Tsimikas. He was the bargain last year, wasn't he? I don't think we're going to have another one of those anytime soon. We might have Neco Williams or someone like that at 4 million, but not for the big 6. 1 5.5, and then probably Trent. Midfield, Mr. 2 Point, probably the enabler. Brownhill, as it was last year. We've got some options this year. Lots of options. 5.5 to 6.5, probably the punt value, as I was saying. That's probably your Ben Rama. 7 to 9.5, that was players like Greenwood. And then we've got the premiums, Salah and Bruno, as I went with. Some people went with Son. But you noticed there was quite a gap in midfield. And I think, again, we might find that there's that gap's being filled this season. But Gabe, you're going to come on to the 8 million players, aren't you, later on? There's a ton of them. There wasn't that, that gap. The pricing, I think we all said that Mahrez was too expensive last year, this, that, and the other. And then forwards, well, one relatively low-priced forward, 4.5 to 6. I'm not sure who that was at that start of the season, but obviously players like Dennis. God, sorry for feeling sick, but there we go. Then we've got players like Tony. But then who else did we start with at the start of last season up front? Ings, Watkins, players like that, because Aston Villa had a good start to the season last year, didn't they? So yes, that's roughly how the structure was last year. So should we have a look at our about the options for this season then, boys?
Yeah, let's do that. Just a couple comments. So Shams doesn't like the new color scheme. I think the FPL intern was let loose, and they didn't really bother to do much beyond the reskin. Steve, like, this is definitely true. I think if a first choice goalkeeper does get injured, there are some great backup keepers at 4 million. It's one of the reasons I like Sanchez, because Steele is there at 4 million still. Andy Martin says there's probably 10% of the active player base on Twitter at the moment. So once there's 10 million players, maybe 1 million. Good to see FPL Teacher back as well after his guest appearance. Focal's in the house, so thanks for coming and supporting, man. Really appreciate that. To be honest, I just put this on, Oscar, so I can screenshot that you were in the chat. But I'm shameless. I'm shameless, but not as shameless as my good friend Ray, who lost that coin flip where he will never get a follow from you, I hope. So Andy Martin is going to spend 9.5 million with Alisson as well. I think Sterling to Chelsea going to happen. Is he a shout? I think for 10 million, it's a wait and see for me. I see a lot of value in the 8 million mid, so I'm not so convinced. And I agree, Andy. I definitely think that people are sleeping on the 4.5 million defenders. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think we might find that there's actually going to be 2 to 3 of them. Like you got the Tomiyasu's, Dunks, Johnny's of the world. There's a lot of options. Even at 5 million, I like the looks of kind of Dean, Trippier. I think they're both 5 million. There's so many good defenders that are going to be nailed on and do well. I think Dunk has had a price drop because he had an injury-ridden season, but in the 2 seasons prior, he had like 8 goals and 3 assists, which I know is not something you can rely on for a centre-back, but it's still worth seeing. Yeah, I thought you'd like that.
Nima, a quick question on that conversation, especially to someone like you that plays the ownership game. At the beginning of the season, there's going to be a pretty strong template of those 3 big defenders, right? Trent, Cancelo, Robertson. So would you advise, do you think, going with these more budget ones to try to like maybe maximize some points in the attacking areas of the field, or are you going to go the template route? Are you going to stick with the template at the beginning of the season, go with that, even though you see an opportunity here? Like, these are kind of like the decisions. Obviously, we're only going to know in hindsight, but how do you view that going forward?
That's a great question. So the first draft I've landed on does have Cancelo, Chilwell, and Trent, but then I have Tomiyasu and Dunk as 2 4.5 million defenders to rotate currently. Johnny's in the thinking as well. So I've seen a lot of teams with 4 or 5 big defenders. So they might have a double up with Robertson or James and Chilwell and Trent. There's a lot of Perisic's at 5.5 million. There's definitely some, people with Diaz or Laporte. I don't think I'm going to go down that route, even if the template appears so, just because the way the season is going to be cut into quarters. I feel like if it goes wrong, I can very quickly fix it. That's kind of my thinking. I just want at least one expensive defender from each of those 3 teams that I consider the best defenses in Liverpool, City, and Chelsea. Spurs does have a good start, but I don't like Dyer at 5 million. I don't know if I can stretch the 5.5 Perisic. It really back.
I think the other thing is I question, and we're getting a little bit off topic here, but I question how if Chelsea's really the 3rd best defense. I don't think they were at the end of last season, for most of last season at all. I think Tottenham have improved. defensively, and I think Lloris could be another, like maybe the third highest scoring goalkeeper, for example, and then therefore some of those defenders could be some great value. But Perisic, I think, is just with the five substitutions. I think he's just a little bit too old to really invest 5-5, and I think he's just a little bit too expensive at his age.
Yeah, I think he doesn't get over 60 minutes.
It's not this Spurs bias coming out again, Gabe, is it?
Hey, I gave Spurs lots of credit. I think Spurs defense is going to be better than Chelsea's defense. How about that? That's pretty good.
You know,
that's especially for me.
We did say we're going to pull you up on this Spurs bias every single time.
I think he's fair point there though, because obviously they're getting rid of Rudiger. Christensen's gone. Not that he was exactly a stalwart of the defense, but there's talks of moving to a back four, new formation. It might take time to settle in. For me personally, though, I think either Mendy at 5 million or at least kind of Chilwell or James, one of them at 6 million. I just feel like they're so cheap. I could start with one of them and I could drop them to Perisic if Perisic did well. But because of the worries about his minutes, I'd rather go without him. So maybe Lloris is the shout there. But again, as a cheap defense kind of guy, spending 1 million more than Raya or Sanchez on Lloris seems a bit of a dud subject for me for a Tottenham player when I'm an Arsenal fan. Mendy at 5 million as well as there. I really like him. Let's look at the first team structure. So this is the structure one with 2 premium mids. For each of these structures ahead, guys, we have the same screenshot from the previous picture where we're looking at the top 50 managers and how they set up their team last season. And then there's like a green arrow to show how this draft for this season is either kind of spending more money on a certain position and less money in another position. So you can see here in the 2 premium mids version, we essentially have, we still have the really premium midfielder in Salah, but the under 10 million investment is going up into someone like a Son. So there's actually 2 premium mids, which means that money from the 10 million forward has dropped down to like a Jesus at 8 million. But why don't we read out for the podcast listeners very quickly what this lineup looks like. So from the back, we've got Raya in goal. We have Trent, Chilwell, Laporte, and Tomiyasu in defense as a back 4. We have Salah, Son, Luis Diaz, and Neto. We have Gabriel Jesus and Ivan Toney. That rounds off the 11. And then in the defense on the bench, we have Dennis, Dunk, Andreas, who's obviously moving from Man United, we've heard. So that's a great 4.5 million fifth midfield option. And Greenwood is a 4.5 million forward option. So what I see here is it kind of similar to my team. Dunk and Tomiyasu would potentially rotate. And you're kind of relying on just hoping that Neto at 5.5 does enough to warrant being the weakest in the starting 11. What are your guys' thoughts on this as a true premium mids option? Obviously spending more money in midfield and not having that premium striker in Haaland.
I think the issue you've got immediately is how do you get it? If Haaland, even Ronaldo goes off, if he's still there, how are you going to get to him? That's my immediate thing. You're taking a hit, are you? Do you know what I mean? So
week 2 he faces Bournemouth, right? It's like a proper captaincy option, and if he flies in game week 1, you're going to be scrambling, and you don't want to pre-plan that move potentially.
I think that's why if I was going to go 2 premium midfielders, I think I would go whole hog and go a 3-mium. Actually, I don't like this 2 midfield option. I think given the structures there are this year, I think I would prefer to go 1 midfielder and 1 forward. And like you say, there are players around the 8 million who, if required, you can take a little bit of money out of somewhere and jiggle it around. But no, my immediate thoughts are, and again, I think the caveat is, don't shoot Nima for who put these drafts together. Because
these are like 1-minute drafts. Yeah,
I know.
You made them obviously before the prices came out, and obviously then the site launched yesterday, and I just kind of tried to keep to the main theme, which was 2 premium, 3 premium.
It's the price points. It's all about price points. So imagine.
Yeah, I'm not saying these picks are right. Like these are not the right picks by any means. If we go to the next one, and then maybe you can respond on the next one, Gabe, and we'll just alternate in the interest of time. So what you'll notice is I've tried to differentiate. So like here I've got Johnny as well. So I've also changed Neto to Wissa. So I'm trying to show that like these are price points very much so. Like I'm not saying these are the right assets 1 month out before preseason and before any kind of transfer windows shut. So I have gone for Raya again in goal. That's just because there's already Dunk on the bench. So I didn't want to add Sanchez, but he's viable. This one has Raya, Trent, Laporte, not Cancelo, Tomiyasu and Johnny, Salah, Son, Diaz, Wissa, and then Haaland and Undav, bench of Dunk, Andreas Green with Dennis. So here, the immediate difference you see is there's a lot more money spent on the mid and the second mid and the forward. So we've got 3 premiums. It does have a massive impact on the back with only Trent being like a major attacking defender. Laporte is there, but at 6 million, he's obviously 1 million cheaper than Cancelo. There's a lot of money also taken out of the defenses we can see here and the forwards from the graphics. So, Gabe, I'd love to hear your thoughts on free premium. Is the kind of the cheaper defensive assets that we have at our disposal this season an opportunity to maybe start with free premiums and downgrade one to any other player you want if it goes wrong? Or obviously there's early wildcard as well.
So I want to address Charles Kelly here mentions the point. Injuries worry me about Holland. And it's true, Holland has been very injury prone in his career. He's also been the talisman since at a very young age, not just for his club, but for his country. And I think Holland will be one of those players that could be subbed at 60, 70 minutes. And that's how he'll be maintained throughout the season. Obviously, he won't play cup games or anything like that. But that's another thing to think about is, do you want to spend 11.5 on a player that may be substituted because Pep can have a rotation in the front there, and he knows that he needs to protect the young investment. Now, if we go back to the 3 premiums there, I think that's precisely the way to do it. We were talking earlier about the value in the 4 or 5 defenders, and I think Johnny is one of them. I think a double up with Tomiyasu and Ben White is not a bad idea as well. I think especially early in the season, we've seen Arsenal's fixtures to begin the season. And then just looking at the and I know I'm talking about specific players here. I'll get to the structure in just a moment. But looking at the Laporte and Raya, you could kind of flip those. You could go Ederson and Ben White, for example. And I kind of like that a little bit better. You just Laporte, I don't know what's going to happen if there is going to be a rotation. I'd rather start with Ederson, and then you could get the an Arsenal defender that may get some bonuses who may be more valuable than the similarly priced 4-5 Raya. So if you want to make the 3 premiums work, I think you do have to go with some of the like an 11.5. You can't go with all 12 millions and ups for example. I think that hurts you too much. And then the other thing here is, you are stuck in a rotation between basically Wissa, Undav, and Dunk to start the season. And that's, I don't mean specifically those players, but those players at those price points, you can substitute
like 2 5-5s and a 4-5, yeah.
Yeah, and you want maybe one of those rotating in, but to need 2 of those in a rotation of 3 would make me very nervous.
I agree.
That's a good point. I think if you downgraded Laporte, you could weaken the defense, but you could then upgrade one of those rotation options. But it is very slim margins at this point. You're not going to have money in the bank to start the season, that's for sure.
The problem we've got is we're scratching around for 5.5 forward who we're going to require to play. We've got Dunk as well, obviously can come in. My view here is that the 3 premiums, I think probably lends itself to 5 at the back.
It does, but because of the way I play, I've made sure to still squeeze in an attacker. That's why it's my draft, right?
I know. No,
Every other free premium team that I've seen on Twitter has like a heavy ass back line because there's so much more value in 5.5 defenders than there are in mids and strikers.
I agree. I forgot his name, but the lad at Forest as well, 6 million as well as another option, isn't he? Yeah, that's him.
And Brennan Johnson, 5.5. So you have options. I've seen many free premium drafts with 4.5 million forwards where they actually are playing like a 5-4-1, or they're playing a 4-5-1, that kind of formation.
Yeah, I think the key here is that you've got Dunk and Andreas sat on the bench. It's not as if you haven't got a bench there. I know this is just for this team, right? Just ignore it from the perspective. But if we were looking at it specifically here, you've got people who can come in. But I just think I agree with Gabe. I think we're trying to bang square pegs into round holes here, trying to rotate a little bit too much, and hence for my genuine feel at the moment is probably 3 is probably too much. I think it's going to hurt you in other aspects. That's just me anyway. I'm not sure what you think, guys.
I might go with 3 premiums. Yeah, I don't know, because I do like the cheap players, and I like to find like in that kind of setup, you're forced to play like 2 or 3 really cheap ass differentials. So if an Undov or a Brennan Johnson or a Wissa or Neto flies at the start of the season,
oh yeah,
you're gonna be covered. It doesn't matter that you got a weak ass team starting ahead of you. Like, you're gonna fly up those ranks. So, and you've got all 3 premiums. So it's exciting. And if it goes wrong, you kind of just get out of it with the wild card.
There is that. But sorry, Gabe. Sorry.
I was just going to say, if one of them goes wrong, right, it just takes it narrows your like kind of like the possible outcomes. It narrows your probability of success on that front, because you only have 3, whereas if you spread your money around, you have more of a probability because you have more kind of assets, even though the probability that they hit may be a little bit less. That's why I think you have to find a balance, like Chris was saying.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that obviously we're still a few weeks away from the start of the season. Let's see what pre-season brings. Let's see who else signs. Let's see who moves here and there. I'm not discounting it. I'm saying that what I know at this moment in time, I'm probably not so keen.
Fair enough. I think at this point, on that note of pre-season and 1 month till the launch, let's rattle through these formations and get some more juicy stuff with your data, obviously, in the matchups, which are much more proprietary information to Net That Haul. And I think that's why everyone's here. That's why we have YouTube members, right? Paying the subscription each month to get the data a couple of days in advance and stuff next season. And obviously the launch of the Discord I mentioned and teased to last week. So that will definitely be going out before the season starts. This is structure 3, which is 2 premiums still, but rather than 2 in midfield, it's 1 mid, 1 forward. It's Salah and Haaland. It does afford a Jesus in there as well. It again has like a Neto and Diaz. Unfortunately, it does need a 7 million mid, which is Grealish. And I think everything under 8 million in midfield, I would actually argue that the defenders or strikers at those price points are better value. You have Raya in goal again. You have Trent, Chilwell, Cancelo, and Tomiyasu with basically the same bench you've seen in every team. Dennis, Duncan, Treyas, Greenwood. Here we're spending a little bit more on forward and a little bit less on mid compared to the top 50 managers setting up their teams and how they did it last year. My key thing here is like at 7 million, there are assets like Rafinha if he stays in the Premier League, Zaha at Palace potentially, despite the kind of stop-start beginning of the season for them, where it's 1 good, 1 bad, 1 good, bad fixture. You get to 6.5, you've got Odegaard, 6 million, Martinelli, but there's the rotation risk. You know, it starts to get very weak. So Grealish is not someone I'm excited about. The only reason I included him in this draft is because I think he's worth a thought. He only had 3 assists and 3 goals last season. We know Pep's players are notorious for taking time to bed in. It was the same with Cancelo when he joined. He really wants them to learn to be a system player. And maybe he had his kind of season there. Now, with the likes of kind of Jesus leaving and Sterling on the leave as well, potentially, I do wonder if that opens up an opportunity for Grealish. Let's watch preseason, though, so we won't spend too long on this draft either. But do you guys have any thoughts on kind of this structure of having 2 premiums, but 1 of each? I think Andy Martin wants to do this too, but he's actually talking about De Bruyne instead of Salah and Kane instead of Haaland. So that's another alternative for the listeners if they want to do this formation with different players.
I'll tell you why I like this. Is because if we're on the wrong premium, it's very easy to make 1 transfer and move. Do you know what I mean? You know, I just think you've got an option of jumping sideways if you need to. I also like the idea of I think there's a bit more flexibility about the team. I agree with you about 7 million. I think it's a real problem. In fact, I think who else is there? I mean, Rafinha, if he even stays in the Premier League. Harvey Barnes, Gabe. Who else? Again, I think Haaland and Jesus up front is good. I mean, you could change Jesus out for somebody like, I don't know, Tony, although probably Ericsson not going to Brentford now is a problem. You've obviously got Saka, who you could put in instead of Diaz. Neto, I'm not sure about. But that 5.5 million slot is there to think about as well. I quite like this. I quite like this, guys.
I like it. Yeah, I think an alternative.
I'm closest to this right now. I'm probably closest to this right now if I was going with something.
This might actually be my team. I'm looking at it. I think that might actually be my draft team. This is the only one that's real out of all the ones I made. It's the one I've landed on. But something you could do.
Great minds, Nima. Great minds. Top 1K minds.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if we can do it back to back, but let's see. Let's see. If we do it back to back, I'll never live that one down. But just to respond to some of the comments in the chat. So Podner had said about the free premiums. Good to see another one of our YouTube haulers here, another one of our members. Thank you for support, Podner. Who do you captain when you have free premiums? I think that's a good question. You sacrifice a lot, and it makes the captaincy more difficult. I would like to just kind of look at the first 6 weeks, and as long as I feel like I can cover them with captaincy, I'm not sure that the money is as well spent on the third if you've then got to pick between like 2, 4.5 and 5.5 to start every week. Michael makes a great point. It might have been about the last draft or maybe this one even, which is because there's so much value in the 8 million midfielders, maybe having 2 slots for them. So in this scenario, I think the difficulty is I have this exact team and my alternative to this team is someone like a Laporte or Diaz instead of Cancelo that allows Grealish to be Saka. So I'm kind of questioning Saka and Laporte versus Cancelo and Grealish. I do feel like the one with the cheaper defense is better, but because of that kind of more template style, I don't know if I can resist Cancelo. He is City's kind of best playmaker after De Bruyne, in my opinion. And just a quick hello to William, another one of our members on YouTube. Thank you so much for your support. Let's go to the fourth structure because we do have a very interesting one with one premium after that, which Gabe has put up. This is the big at the back, right? Every preseason wouldn't be a preseason without this draft. This is what everyone was looking for, right? It's the Mendy in goal, Cancelo, Robertson, Trent, Chilwell, James in the back line playing every week. Salah, Neto, Martinelli, Haaland is still there as a premium, and Jesus as well has snuck in. So this is where it gets a bit ropey. You have 2 4.5 million midfielders on your bench with Greenwood a 4.5 million striker. So you're kind of relying with maybe the 5 subs in the Prem and expecting most of your 11 to get a cameo to never use your bench almost. You are basically playing with 11 players and waiting for that first wildcard if you need to restructure the team. I do really like this, but obviously you can see compared to the top 50 managers of all time, there's 2 green arrows spent extra in defense compared to them last season. There's more money spent on forward because I've snuck in Jesus there as well, or Haaland as well. Mid, there's less spent on because outside of Salah, they are cheap as hell. And forwards, I think most of the 2 premium kind of template teams I've seen so far are more like this. They're not like the one I showed on the screen before where it's a bunch of cheap defenders and you sneak in like a Diaz in there as a 4th midfielder. They're not like that at all.
I mean, first thing I would say is that, and I think we haven't said it yet, but thanks to Fantasy Football Fix for letting us use their average cost per position graphics and things like that. So shout out to those. That's in their pre-season pack. Very worthwhile having a look at it. #ad, as they always.
It's not an ad if we don't get anything.
No,
we're just using the tool, right?
All the same. We're still going to give them some credit.
We'll give them credit, but I think it's more credit when it's not an ad because we're so platform agnostic.
So we are content agnostic. We use Fix, we use Hub, we use Scout, we use Total Football Analysis, we use the 12 Football app. Who else?
Playmaker.
FBRF. We are FPL content sluts, and we're proud of it.
I think we need to clip that. Let's go to your team, Gabe. Do you want to read this one out? Oh, you've been told off in the background. I see. Gabe, why don't you read out the final structure and then we'll go into the fixture swings. We're about halfway through the show, and although team structures is exciting, I definitely want to look at the data that you guys have put together.
Right. So this final structure here, we're looking at this is one premium, and FPL has priced. I'm just going to go like, if we're looking at viable assets we would actually consider, and I don't consider like, for example, Dominic Calvert-Lewin at this stage a viable asset at 8 million, right? The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm not considering Havertz a viable asset. 7, 8. We have eight players at 8 million that FPL is priced at 8 million, and I think there's a reason for this. I think the way this is going to play out is there will be times where these are the assets that really benefit from fixtures, from good fixtures. And if we can kind of ride those good fixtures with these assets, and I think somebody in the chat was saying, what about having 2 of these 8 million players? Well, this team has more than 2. I think this team has 4, and I'll read the team out here. We have Raya in goal. It's a 4-4-2. The back line is Trent, Chilwell, Cancelo, and Johnny. The midfield is Salah, which is the premium. And you have Luis Diaz, 8 million, Saka, 8 million, Foden, 8 million. You have Tony at 7 million, which could change given that they're not likely to sign Eriksen. And Jesus, who's also at 8 million, for example. And then on the bench, we have Begovic, Tomiyasu, good bench player, 4.5. Undav, 5.5, that could become a starter, and Andreas Pereira that we've seen in most drafts. So, Undav could go down to a 4.5, could go down to Greenwood, and then Tony could go up to another player. You'd get an extra million for Tony there. And I'm just looking at these and what I like. So I'll start with what I like about it. What I like about it is I do think that the 8 million bracket will provide some of the best value in the game this season at certain points of the season in certain like fixture blocks, which we'll get to kind of towards the end of the show here. And so I like that it's going to be taking advantage of that, and they'll probably make some money off of those players because they will be highly owned at some point. What I don't like is, and this is I fall into this trap all the time. I'm very much a value player. I want to get the players that provide good value for money, and I think the 8 million players will. But it's the flexibility. It's the loss in flexibility. If first of all, we're gonna have a whole month of the season where players will still be allowed to sign for clubs, right? Where the transfer window is still open. What if there are some transfers that happen that change dynamics of a team? You have to bring a player in. We saw Cristiano Ronaldo come in Gameweek 4 last season. I wasn't prepared to bring him in. You guys were, and you guys certainly benefited from that flexibility in your team structures. And that's obviously what you sacrifice here. But it's still really tempting because the value is so good kind of across the board. I don't know what you guys think, Mariner.
Yeah, well, I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I mean, look, I think the maximum I would go with is 2 8 million assets. And then the idea would be possibly to drop one of them down to someone who perhaps emerges, not necessarily go up. But that's where it's important to have that 500,000 in the bank as well, right? That's the other thing which we keep coming back to about the flexibility. But for me, no, I think that, again, remember this price island scenario. I think that's the way I like it. It's a great little top. I think it was Eric Freeman. I think it was Eric on Always Cheating pre-season last year said it. It's stuck in my head. I think it's brilliant. The idea of jumping from one to the next very easily. I think that's key. I think the other thing, and I just wanted to just touch back, if you don't mind me, guys, just going back to the five at the back. I think the key is look how different it is to the historic format, the historic structure, which has been successful in FPL. Now, I'm not saying that the season's going to be the same as every season, but I just think that for me, I think we need to keep a relatively safe sort of template, and I'm a little bit concerned that 5 at the back actually takes too much money out of midfield and actually the forwards. It leaves you in a similar challenge. Nima, what's your perspective on this 5 at the back? Oh, sorry, the 8 million assets and things.
Yeah, so I think William says it well that 4-4-2 is perhaps the most flexible formation, and he likes flexibility as a big priority going into a season when there's so many unknowns. I do think there's a lot of value in those 8 million mids. I do think maybe having 2 of them is vital, because with 8 of them there, you want to be able to go to the right one if you get it wrong. People think at the start of the season that a price drop is just 0.1 million. It's actually 0.5. If I've got an 8 million player and it's the wrong one and they drop to 7.9, I now have to buy a 7.5 player who's probably gone up to 7.6. The 8 million that did well has gone up to 8.1. Although I'm only 0.2 million away, I can't buy them. My buying power is gone. So having multiple players at the price points where the most exciting assets would be this season and being able to move to them is vital. Is why I like the 2 premiums though, because I like to start the season with the most expensive player in every position apart from goal. I want the most expensive striker generally, midfielder and defender. So something like Trent Salah-Haaland for me, because if it goes wrong, I know that in one move I can get to any other assets without a hit. So that's something I like to think about. The other thing I'd like to say is Robert Ducky asks about how much value is Salah at 13 million out of 10. Robert Ducky saying 4 out of 10. So Andy Martin saying 4 out of 10. So I just thought, obviously, we perhaps start a bit more template, you and I, Mariner. So it's worth putting out other opinions and other play styles, which, as we saw, Andy did very well last season, despite going against the masses, and his triple captain against KDB and the double game 36 was insane. It was actually incredible, right?
It's the beauty of the game. It's the beauty of the game. You know, just because we're going one way doesn't mean to say that we're going the right way. There's more than one. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say the skinning. Oh, I've just said it. Skinning a cat. There's more than one way. Horrible term, isn't it? God,
you have a cat as well. You should stop saying it.
Well. Yeah.
You should definitely stop. But we'll go on to the next section. I just want to say, while you weren't looking, I snuck in a few edit names. So I put in your OR 122 and mine 895. I tried to put in top 1% in Resident Philosopher for you, Gabe, but it didn't fit. But yeah, I just thought I feel very bullish about this season. And if we're going to have our ORs in our names, as I've done without consulting either of you, that means we'll have to have our live ORs in the new season. And that's what a lot of content creators are afraid of. They don't want to put their live OR when it's 7 digits and they're doing a stream every week. But I'm bullish enough to believe that we're going to have another great season, Mariner. So I'll take that bullish maneuver and I'll put our ORs for the next 4 weeks and we'll change them to the right ones.
We're going to be honest, right, Nima? We're going to be honest.
Only facts. Factos, as Ronaldo would say. Talking of him, he's missed training for 3 days due to personal family circumstances, and they leave for their tour on Friday, and we're at Wednesday evening now. So I do wonder if him giving in a transfer request a week ago has anything to do with that. Let's go to the matchups, I think, Gabe. Crystal Palace, Newcastle, Wolves, and Brighton you wanted to cover today.
Yes. So today we have the next 4 teams and the matchups. We'll go through them quickly, similarly to the way we did last time. And again, just I pieced together that like my process here is I go through the stats that I use to create the NetxG metric. And that's a combination of 4 different metrics that I use to create that metric. And I go through like highlighting just the different things that kind of tell me a narrative about a team. So we'll start with, we have Crystal Palace here, and the stats will be in different categories. The first one here will be creativity. And there are some XG stats involved here as well. So Crystal Palace is very much the story of home versus away, right? So I'm going to read the home and away stats, like big chances per 90, 0.84 at home, 0.63 away. Big chances conceded per 90, 1 at home, 1.37 away. Goals per 90. This was interesting. Goals per 90, 0.89 at home and 1.12 away. So a little bit more. And then these are the chances from the left, center, and right. So the zonal matchups. One of the biggest ones here, 3.42 from the left versus 1.89 from the left away. Central at home, this was interesting as well. Central, this is the only stat that was lower at home than it was away. It's 2.79 home versus 3.16 chances in the center away. And then on the right side, 2.53 chances, almost the same, versus 2.26 away. And I think that the reason for these stats are like maybe I think Crystal Palace was more conservative on the road, and they soaked up a lot more pressure. When they attacked more so as a counter-attacking style down the middle than they did down the flanks. Whereas they would like tuck into flanks to deal with the other wingers and sit in a little bit of a deeper shell. Now the biggest stat as far as chances created, chances conceded per 90 from the right side. Home was 2.42 and away was 4.05. I think tactical perspective, I gotta say this kind of like flies in the face of the tactics, because if they are sitting back in a shell away, then why are they conceding those chances from the right hand side? I have to say I don't have an answer for that at the moment. And just a reminder that these matchups reports are like a living document a work in progress. As and players get signed and stuff like that, that I will update these and I'll post them all as one big package on Twitter. We'll do them on the show as well. From a shots perspective, Palace have the 5th fewest shots on conceded per 90, 3.7 conceded per 90, which is really low, and they're clustered in a group with Tottenham, Brighton, Arsenal, and Villa. So quite a a decent group there to be put with. Now again, the home away. We're looking at shots in the box per 90, 9.26 home versus 6.58 away, 1.16 shots in the 6 home versus 0.63 away, and 1.26 goals in the box versus 1.11 goals in the box away. How does a manager deal with that home away split? Maybe this is exactly what he wants. Maybe he wants to get the crowd going at home and do certain things at home. In a way, he wants to just build things up little by little. So I think that's something to watch for, or it could just be circumstantial, right? It could be something that happened last season. It's just something for us to watch for, I think. And then I have some, as far as the tactical focus here. Vieta was quoted as saying, "I always like to talk about animation before the system." And I think this speaks to evolving roles and players they brought in. I mean, they brought in players like Olise and Mateta and Edouard, and then these are players that can rotate kind of in a similar area of the pitch, but can rotate. Now they've also brought in Johnstone, so we don't know which goalkeeper is going to start, if it's going to be Johnstone or Guaita. They brought in another right winger named Malcolm Ebiowe from Derby County, if I'm not mistaken, and Luke Plange. That's how you pronounce it. Luke Plange who's a striker. So I think there still will be a lot of rotation in the forward lines there. And so I don't know exactly what formation they're going to play just yet. Last season they played a base formation of 4-3-3. It switched to a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-4-1-1, and playing a counter-attacking style away. But I think they will need more chances from the center. They can't rely on the wing so much. They want more chances around the box there. And then the other question to ask ourselves is, what's life like without Gallagher? Because Conor Gallagher, as far as I know, hasn't signed it, or will be staying with Chelsea this season. Is that right?
Yeah, it does look like that. I think my biggest call out would be Olise is another 5.5 who we haven't had in the Neto Wissa conversation, probably just because of the starting fixtures, but definitely one I'll be keeping my eye on, because although there might be rotation, I'm excited by him.
Straight into my team, playing Arsenal.
Straight in. I'm gonna rattle through the next into the next one, Gabe.
Sure.
We'll just do these quickly because we want to make sure we get to the questions at the end. We've got about 30 minutes to go, so I'm just conscious we have quite a lot of slides still.
Sure. So the next FPL matchup here is an examination of Newcastle. From the expected stats, they have the 3rd worst non-penalty XG per 90, 1.12 per match, which is not very good. It actually didn't improve since game week 28 when Bruno Guimaraes started. What improved was kind of their big chance conversion, and that's what I'll get to next. For big chance conversion, they're actually mid-table. They're better at 42.9% of big chances converted into goals. That's better than Spurs at 42.3 and Arsenal at 39.13. And they're one of only 4 teams to concede more than 90 big chances last season. No surprise that the other team there is Norwich. So while they seem to have solidified things at home at the end of last season, I think there's still a little bit of a wait and see. From a tactical perspective, they like to play a high line, force errors with and break fast from kind of forced errors in the midfield. They like to play through creative players like Bruno and Saint-Maximin, but they like to mix it up as well. I think Wood is going to get some time. They're going to look for a target in Wood for hold-up play to get those wingers to get in behind them as well. They played a 4-3-3 most of the second half of last season. I wouldn't be surprised if that changed to a 4-4-2, having Wood and Callum Wilson both up top. They could play a diamond in that 4-4-2. They can play it flat. They can play with Almiron on the right, or they can play with Fraser on the right. So I think there are just a lot of questions here. The one thing I'll say is Trippier will be coming back. I think he's an interesting asset at some point. And I think just with the players that they're adding and the increased familiarities with the system, we see the passing map there. This was in the 2-0 win against Arsenal. That passing map shows how central Bruno Guimaraes is and how you have like two areas of creativity on either side of the field. I think that will continue, if not even strengthen, where you'll have more passing on the right-hand side and more penetration on the left-hand side. But this is a team that's not finished building, and we should keep our eye on them.
You know, it's interesting because one of my friends who's a colleague of mine, he had a good season last year, but he doesn't really go on Twitter. He actually kind of asked me when we're looking at goalkeepers, what about Pope? I said I prefer Trippier, and he said, why not both? Obviously, we looked at our FDR last week. I think we had Newcastle defensively for the first 5 down at 13th. Hub had them much higher, and we averaged it at about 10th. But then when I looked at the official FPL app and I clicked fixtures, it was basically just a sea of 10 green fixtures with 1 red. So I can kind of see how, you know, like the normal manager might actually start the season with Pope in goal, or at least start with Trippier. I do like Trippier. I think there's better goalkeepers than Pope personally. I think they excite me from a defensive point of view more so than their attack, especially with the signing of Botman to further strengthen their. I'm not so excited about their chance creation numbers as you've kind of called out here.
Right. Wolves is up next. There's quite a lot on Wolves, so I'll try to get through this one quickly. Interesting that from the expected point of view, they're the second worst non-penalty XG, 1.1 per 90, which is obviously not very good. And to add to that, it's they have bad finishing. So their non-penalty XG on target is 33.11, which is negative 8.64, or it's 8.64 less than their XG. So their shots are taken away, basically opportunities from the goal, which isn't very good. And then we witnessed that kind of all last year, especially early in the season with Adama Traore. Shout out to those who brought him in on a wild card early last season. That was fun. From a creativity perspective, they have a 31% big chance conversion rate, which is the same as Burnley. For those unfamiliar with the Premier League, that's not good. And they have the fewest chances created from the left, which I thought was interesting. 20 fewer, again, than second worst Burnley. So they're not only worse than Burnley on that left-hand side, they're way worse than Burnley. And Lage is going to have to do something quite drastic to kind of change what this team is doing offensively, because Lage is actually an attacking-minded manager. So to have these types of stats, to have the type of season that they had, I'm sure he won't be happy about that. From a shots perspective, only Wolves, Norwich, and Burnley had less than 30 goals in the box last season, and only Wolves and I should say Norwich had less than 240 shots in the box. So again, they're not getting enough penetration, and when they do get penetration, the end product is very much lacking in anything dangerous to the other team. On the bright side, what they did have was Jose Sa. Jose Sa had an unbelievable season last season. He was while he was second in a tier of he was in a second tier of worst for XGOTC, which is expected goals on target conceded. So basically, this is the quality of the shots that he faced. So there's one tier of about 4 or 5 teams that face the most dangerous shots, and you're looking at the Tim Krulls of the world and the Fraser or the Fraser Forsters of the world. And Za is in a second tier, so he faced decently tough shots. With an expected goals on target conceded of 47.5, but he only conceded 40 goals from that. So that's an expected goals prevented of plus 7.5, which was best in the division last season. Second best was Allison at plus 1.1. So this is significantly better than the second best goalkeeper, and I thought that was interesting. We'll see what kind of that's an outlier season for Za. If we're honest, if you go back to his career, he's never performed quite that well. So I think again, Bruno Lage will have to make some changes. The the tactical focus says, Wolves mostly maintain their 3-4-3 in possession and 5-4-1 without possession. But Lage really wants to play a back four. Last summer, Lage said, I have this direction. Either you go with me or I need to find someone to go with me. So he's going to start, I think, leaving people behind. There's a tension in that locker room right now because the stalwarts from Nuno Espirito Santo days, they want to play a back three, and Lage wants to play a back four. But Lage doesn't have the players to play a back four, so he needs to buy players to play that back four, and that will create more tensions in the locker room. I think Wolves are going to be a little bit of a mess initially unless one of those factions kind of wins out. The graphic we have here is one just to show how few chances, for as far as the chances created, heat map on the left shows how few chances the Wolves create on the left-hand side there. And then the second one is actually it's a shots heat map, or a shots plot, right? And these goal attempts show that they actually have almost an equal amount of shots inside the box as they do outside the box. They need a lot more penetration to get some better chances. And without that, it doesn't really matter who's finishing. Neto still provides good value. If Neto can bring that penetration, I think there could be something there.
This is very interesting. I just had a little look at kind of how they lined up last season. And towards the end, and when they played Man City, they kind of played a front two with Neto playing as a striker on the right and Jimenez on the left, which kind of paints your picture of not much opportunities coming from the left. Although there was a few games earlier in the season where Neto played behind Jimenez on the left, and they actually had like Jimenez as a target man and kind of two wingers either side. I think Neto at 5.5 has been a lot of questions, hasn't there, about the fact that he has like 7 career goals and like 70 league starts or games. Maybe they're not all starts. But I think what I like about him is it's a very short and small sample size. But I know in the kind of 13 games that he started last season, he had like a 0.5 XG per 90, which it is a small sample size. But I'm hoping that's kind of the Pedro Neto we're going to see going into this season. And at that price point, it's slim pickings anyway. And if he's potentially out of position, why not with those fixtures?
They do worry me a bit, though.
Yeah,
it feels a bit trappy. I don't know why. But saying that, does Visser as well.
There's also like financial turmoil on the back end with Wolves. I think what the owner owes like 60 billion to some bank or something like. So there's all sorts of like just bad vibes going around Wolves these days.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I'm not entirely sure. I think I'd probably be happier with I think I trust them more in defense than attack.
I do like Johnny. He's the one I've put in for now, but I actually prefer Ait Nouri. But let's see what happens there and how nailed on he actually is.
More uncertainty.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to try to whip through this, Nima, because I know we're running out of time here. Last one is Brighton. From an expected stats point of view here, we're looking at the third worst non-penalty XG delta. So that's non-penalty goals minus non-penalty XG at minus 10.93. So again, Brighton again underperforming. And I think, I think Graham Potter deserves a lot of praise for what he's done with his team, what he's done with the club. But I think he also deserves a lot of indictment because this club has not had a viable striker, a real forward that can put away at least what he's given. You don't even have to do that much, but put away what you're given. They missed out on almost 11 goals here, basically because of their bad finishing. To add to that, their XG was 54.45 at the end of the season, while their XG on target, now this isn't non-penalty, this includes penalty, was 40.61, and they scored 42 goals on that. So it's we're looking at almost a 14 goal difference there between the XG and the XG on target, and then they even got lucky maybe with an extra couple of goals there based on the shots. So I think Undav, could he be that guy? I don't know enough about him to really say, but if he is, I think he could be really productive if he is that guy. from a creativity perspective, top 6 in chances created from the left, right, which I thought was interesting. So top 6 in chances created from the left and right, and conceded from the left and right. They were top 6. So they have 130 chances created from the left, 125 from the right, 108 conceded from the left and right, respectively, and that's top 6 for all of those. And then they're also 7th fewest for chances created and conceded from the center. So they allow chances from the center against them, and they don't create chances from the center. 101 created versus 126 conceded. So they have some problems up the spine there. And will the loss of Basuma affect that further? I'm not really sure. I'm not sure how they're going to account for that. From a shots perspective, they had the 3rd fewest shots in the 6 last season, only 26 shots in the 6. Which is just something that I'm starting to pay attention to. I don't know how much reliability we can give to that, since a shot in the 6 is also typically a big chance. But shots in the 6, only 26 out of 38 games last year, which isn't very good. The tactical focus here. So Brighton, they're in a 3-4-3/4-2-3-1 when they're in possession, and a 5-3-2 when they're out of possession. On the right side, we don't know if it's going to be March or if it's going to be Lamptey, if there's going to be some sort of rotation. Surely with the 5 subs, we'll see some rotation there. Cucurella, I wrote here, is vital to the chance creation from the flanks, and as he is among the highest accurate passers into the box in the division. We see the graphic there. I know you can't read it; it's really small, but the blue circle there. The x-axis is minutes played. So Cucurella very much on the right side, played many minutes, and then the right axis is the percentage percent accuracy of their passes into the box. So despite the fact that he's played many minutes with plenty of opportunity to miss on those passes, he has among the highest percentage of passes in the box, which shows you why Pep Guardiola probably wants him. So what happens if he leaves? I'm not really sure. Also, the finishing must improve. Will Undav do it? What's Caicedo's role? I think Caicedo is a really interesting player. It's kind of like he's not a 6, it's not a 10. Can come up with some fantastic goals every once in a while. He's a player that I might put on a watch list. But I think Brighton it's really interesting because Brighton are very much a solid team. They create chances and they defend decently well. They don't finish chances well. But there are a lot of questions. There's a lot of movement with losing Basuma and with getting a new striker. That I just think there are a lot of questions with Brighton more than answers at this point.
Yeah, no, I think you make some great points. I'd like to throw Trossard in. I think he's 6 million. He could be an interesting asset just to add to Undav in the conversation and Dunk in defense or Sanchez in goal. But I think those are kind of the only assets from Brighton I have on my radar. And maybe there's a nice rotation there between Dunk and someone to find. But I'm sure we'll look at that when we look at the fixture block. Yeah, I think that was great. Thanks so much, Gabe. So we've done, is that 8 teams now?
We've done,
or 9.
No, 9 teams.
9 teams. Okay, so you're working your way down the Premier League table by where they finish, right? So we've got some exciting ones to come in the future episodes.
All the best is yet to come, Nima.
It is. So just to Nehal's question, good to see you as well, mate, tuning in. So, and James98, good to see you. Undav, is he a likely starter? So from what I understand, he's been signed as the Morpai replacement. So I would think so. Mr. Watermelon, morning from Malaysia. So he's on your neck of the woods, Chris.
Yeah, where did Undai come from? Did he come out of the Belgian league, was it?
That's where Trossard came from, and he was like the best scorer of he won like
yeah.
all the
I was going to say, I think he's one to watch. I think he's a tough one to.
So I think he's come from the Bundesliga, unless I'm mistaken. Maybe I am mistaken. I'll have a look. He's from a team called Union, so I instantly, it is Belgian first division. Yeah.
Is it Union Liège or someone? I'm not sure. I don't know.
Like that, yeah. I'll be honest. I hadn't come across him until they signed him.
I mean, look, my caveat about players who come out from leagues abroad is how much weaker is that league in comparison to the Premier League? But saying that, how much weaker are his players around him? Is all of a sudden, is someone going to create more for him? That's the challenge. So I think it's an interesting thought at 5.5. I think, but let's face it, we saw what happened with a 5.5 price point last year, didn't we? It wasn't pleasant at times. But yeah, let's see. I quite like Trossard. I like you. I like that.
Nice. Okay, let's go to the fixture swings, blocks, and rotations. I think be exciting to look at the data. There was something I was going to put from the live chat, but I seem to have lost it. I just thought quickly bring this up in case we miss it later. So Tyler asked, and I think someone else in the chat, Shams also has him. They were interested in Walker in terms of no signing, guaranteed start of 5 million. I keep my eye on that. I think City will move very aggressively for Cucurella when the time comes, and Cancelo will move to the right back role. So not for me personally, just because I would keep that in mind. If the season starts and there's no one signed, I think maybe we reassess. Obviously, this is only the second episode of preseason, guys. We're going to move to looking at the goalkeepers and defenders next week in detail and the power tables. The week after, for episode 4, we're going to look at the midfielders. Episode 5, the forwards. And then I think episode 6 will be the pre-game week 1 episode of the preseason content. So we'll kind of reassess some drafts then, and we might do some RMTs like we did last year, where you can submit your game week 1 drafts, and maybe we'll even get a famous guest again to come and give you all 1 out of 10 as we start to drink more and more as the show goes on. But yeah, let's go without further ado into the fixture swings and the data. So we're not going to obviously read this all out, but I think the key thing is obviously the blocks, the swings you've highlighted in the graphic. For anyone listening on podcast, I highly recommend tuning in and finding roughly the 1 hour, 16-minute mark. We will timestamp this as well. I think this is something to digest when you get a chance in your own time, but we'll at least give you some insights off the back of the data that you can action from.
Definitely, Neighbour. So shall I just quickly run through what I've found?
Yeah, go for it, man.
All right. So of course, like we say it every year, but when we start building a team, we can't just think about the players. We have to think about the fixture difficulty, and we have to think about attacking and defensive fixture difficulty, and that changes whether they're home and away. So obviously, we've done our fixture difficulty release last week, but now what we're looking at is a bit more detail as to where we might want to jump on or off from assets. And, it could be sort of like after a fairly long run of favourable fixtures, or it could be, there's just a block of them. We'll show you a few examples of this. So here's the attacking information on the screen for you all. I think it's a bit like last year. I think the swings are quite subtle. And there doesn't look to be any natural break point, where there was a big fixture swing where a number of teams changed at this moment. Blocks wise, well, Liverpool and City look like long-term holds. Surprise, surprise, stop the press ride. Arsenal between game week 2 and 5 look good, but not in game week 1. Chelsea from 3 to 7 look pretty good as well. And Spurs, you could argue even that they're actually okay right throughout, but certainly 1 through 6. This, just for information, this goes up to game week 10. So probably not far away from your first wild. I mean, some people are talking about wildcarding around. Is it the international break in game week 8 and 9? Is it between 8 and 9?
Yeah.
I think it is.
Yeah, so, I think it's the one before the World Cup, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, that might get you up to, this might get us to your first wildcard. Other teams not highlighted, Brentford game week 1 through 4. But again, that depends on what's happening with Eriksen. So it looks like he's not going. So take this with a pinch of salt, because, clearly this is data which was taken from the end of last season and then matched up from that. So, as I say, always the caveat, think about it yourselves. Jumping on and off teams, interestingly enough, the one which I've highlighted is Wolves. You see at game week 3 how they suddenly go positive, but they then go very negative at game week 6. So they could be a jump on, jump off type of scenario. Now, of course, probably we might just hold Neto anyway if we've got him. But it might also lend itself to rotation as well. What's your first views on this, lads? Gabe? What's your view?
Yeah, so given the uncertainty that we talked about with Wolves, is that really where you're going to be maximizing points, jumping off of Wolves assets for a little stretch of a 3-game stretch in there, or could bigger? I think bigger gains could be found in jumping other assets, for example, the 8 million assets or something like that, or even new assets that we're not even looking at. For example, if Ronaldo goes, does Bruno Fernandes become all of a sudden really interesting? And I'm looking at United's FDR there. That's quite a green one for a little while as well.
Yeah, pretty neutral though. I think that's the thing with Manchester United. I think it's green, but only just. I think you're right. I think Wolves it's a tough one to call. You mentioned we've just covered them, haven't we? But I just wanted to give an example, and of course, the idea with this is to, shall we say, to look at this yourselves and try and figure it out. Nima, I was going to put the slide on now. If you want to move the slide across, because I want to look at the rotation.
So not the Leicester but this is the rotation slide, yeah.
Fixture rotation attack, yeah. So I mean, for this, and this is where it's quite interesting because one of the rotations I've picked out for attack is Leicester Wolves. And you can see Leicester have got a very strange run of fixtures. It's like Jekyll and Hyde. 1.8, then negative, then what's that, 3.1? I'm struggling to see my own screen because I'm half blind and I'm on a little laptop screen. 3.1, then minus 1.6, then 1.4. Whereas Wolves give you a little bit of flexibility there, certainly up to game week 7. Then it goes downhill. But that would be, if this was the case, if you were looking at this, I don't know, would you look at a Dewsbury Hall or someone like that as a cheap? But he's 5, not 4.5, which is a pain. But Leicester have got Brentford. So this is the rotation between the two teams. Brentford at home, Fulham at home, Southampton at home, Newcastle at home, Manchester United at home, Southampton at home, and Villa at home. So that's how you look for a rotation, right? And I mean, you could go even more. You can even go to a 3-way rotation, which I put on the screen as well. But I'm not going to go through that. But I think the key here is, what you've got to do is look at the fixture difficulty and then try and find your own way around it. I've highlighted one, but I think that, the key is that there's also a rotation around Arsenal, Brighton, and Leicester. There's also a rotation around Arsenal, Leicester, and Wolves. So they're pretty subtle, but I think there are some rotation options. I think the issue is does your flexibility and does your team structure allow for that rotation? I think that's going to be the challenge. What's your view, Nima?
I think Gabe should rotate Martinelli, Harvey Barnes, and Trossard. I'm just teasing. I would kill myself if I started the season with those 3.
Yes, exactly. It's not really a
but
rotation.
No, I do really like that. No, I do like that. I think I'm more of a rotating 4.5 million defenders than attackers guy.
Me
also
too.
there's an attacking rotation. The reason I say that is that I've always found that for your cheap attackers, they're priced that way for a reason. And if you've got a 6.5 million mid or forward, you don't necessarily know when the points will come, but they'll get a certain consistent number of points across the season. So if you bench them in what appear to be the tough fixtures, like say Dallas when he got all his points against City, that's not the way to do it. Like if I had a Dallas or a Souček when they were in form, it would be as my 4th mid at 5 million, as my 4 million defender that I start every week or whatever. With defenders, I feel like the ceiling for the 4.5 ones isn't as high. So if you rotate them and get it wrong, I don't mind getting like 1 or 2 points from the one I started and 6 points from the one I benched, because 4 points isn't going to change my season or my game week personally, in my opinion. I'm a bit upset, but it's not the end of the world. Whereas if I bench someone like a Gallagher when he gets 21 points because it was a tough fixture on paper based on numbers, but he comes out and plays out his skin and hauls like mad, I don't like that. So that's why you'll see my bench is quite weak, and I probably will not look to rotate in any of my bench players apart from 2 4.5 million defenders if I go that way personally. Yeah. So the attacking rotation is a difficult one for me to discuss because it's not one I like.
No, it's not one I'm necessarily like. I mean, as much as anything, I'm just trying to point it out for people. Like it's a more holistic sort of thing to be able to try and find these rotations. It may be that the if your threemium might throw you into an attacking rotation. I don't know. There's a possibility that could force you into that scenario. Should we move on to the defense?
Yeah, let's do
Nima?
that. I've just gone over all of this. But these are blocks. Okay, so these were just saying that Liverpool and City are long-term holds. And it has a few graphics as well for anyone listening on podcast at 1 hour, 24:33 of where to kind of hold Arsenal, Brighton, Chelsea, Spurs, and West Ham. But let's go to the defense rotation.
Yeah, so fixture defense rotation. Okay, so we've got that on the screen now, I think. I'm looking at my own information here. So what did I spot here? Well, the first ones, and this I think I agree with you, these are a little bit more interesting. The challenge is that whilst there are rotations using our fixture difficulty, for example, Brentford and Palace, you can see on the screen there. So, you can go from, so you've got a number of home fixtures, but not necessarily easy ones. Arsenal at home, Manchester United at home, Villa at home, Everton at home. That should be easy, but might not be. Brentford at home, then Newcastle, and then Manchester United again. If you did that, interesting enough, our fixture difficulty quite likes that one. I don't know if you can see it's the top of the four there. It's quite noticeable how strong those matchups are. So it's not. When I started looking at the fixtures, I thought, oh, that's a bit strange, but the fixture difficulty is what it is. Spurs and West Ham, first 7 fixtures: Southampton home, Forest away, Wolves home, Forest away, West Ham away, Fulham at home, Newcastle at home. Quite like that. That's quite interesting. Arsenal and Spurs, the North London rotation. Nima, what about that one?
I like that. That looks very nice.
Southampton, Leicester, Wolves at home, Forest away, Villa at home, Fulham at home, Everton at home. That's not bad. And Arsenal and Newcastle, home Forest, home Leicester, away Bournemouth, away Fulham, home Villa, home Palace, home Everton. There's a few rotations, and I think there's more if you look carefully. Right?
Yeah, so, no, I like that. I think I prefer the Arsenal Newcastle the most. Something like a Trippier, Tomiyasu. With Tottenham, I don't really want to be doing Tomiyasu, Dyer, and Perisic. Seems like a bit much to rotate. No. Palace Brentford could be interesting, but the thing is, I want to see who settles in goal for Palace, and for Brentford, I really like their goalkeeper, which I then obviously wouldn't be rotating.
No, I'm not sure I'd rotate goalkeepers, but I mean, look, there's an option there, isn't there? You've got Palace and Brentford, so you've got a Raya and Gaeta rotation there if you wanted it.
Yeah, okay. It is there. I think you could rotate goalkeeper. There's like many people say if I get 2 4.5 million goalkeepers, I've got 2 chances of getting the right one at the start of the season, right?
Yeah, definitely. Gabe, what's your view?
Well, as far as rotating goalkeepers, we've talked about this one before, and I feel like you miss the hauls when you rotate goalkeepers. The random clean sheet that's kept against an underperforming, maybe top 8 team or something like that, and you don't expect it, and it's sitting there with 10, 11 points with their goalkeeper on the bench. So I'd rather just go with one goalkeeper. If you got the goalkeeper wrong, the difference isn't going to be that much anyway. You can fix that on the wild card. But as far as these rotations, I agree with Nima. I wouldn't want to rotate I wouldn't want to double up. So if you're looking at Raya, probably not going to look at a Brentford defender as well. The Tottenham West Ham, again, I think it's okay, but I don't know if I want to go in on West Ham defense. At least at the beginning of the season, I might want to wait for that, if at all. But I did like the Arsenal Newcastle one precisely because you could get a 4.5, and then someone like Trippier or someone like that. So rotations typically not for me, but I am a player that likes to have options. So I get it, but I don't know that I'll be rotating defenders.
All right, Nima, I think I've buggered the slide up actually. So if you want to go back to that slide previously, if you go back to It says attack, but it's actually defense. If you go back another one. Yeah, it's all right. I'm afraid I was doing these when I was I'm on holiday at the moment, so please, the trials and tribulations of being a content creator when you're on leave. So anyway, so this is actually, very quickly, guys, if we can just quickly cover it, this is actually the defensive blocks. So I think what we can see here is that, again, Liverpool and City are long-term holds. Who else have we got of interest? Arsenal, Brighton. Arsenal between game week 2 and 5. Brighton particularly between game weeks 4 and 8, but also in game week 2. Chelsea game weeks 1 through 7. That's interesting, particularly if you're looking at doubling up. The matchups are pretty good, although are we going to have a problem with Rudiger not being there anymore? That's a question we need to ask ourselves. Spurs only through between 3 and 6, particularly in game week 1, and then it's a little bit more patchy. West Ham between 7 and 10. Didn't really find any jump ons, but I mean, Wolves is a clear swing the opposite way once they do turn down at about game week 6, so maybe that's something you're trying to look at do. But yeah, I just wanted to very quickly cover that, Nima. I think, again,
definitely it's valuable.
The key here is, I think I would personally, and this is what I'm going to probably do with my team, is I'm probably going to pick a team which tries to get me to game week 9 without having to make a defensive transfer.
Yeah, I think if I started with like a Johnny or Nuri, I would be tempted to move to West Ham, is my biggest takeaway from this block here. But
yeah,
let's look at the building team value, because we're at time and we've still not got to questions. I think.
Do you want to do this one?
We'll rattle through. There's not much here except that what I said earlier on, but I'll repeat it for anyone who skipped straight to this timestamp. So player prices can obviously just change by 0.1 million a day. They can rise or fall by a maximum of 0.3 million between each game week. And you only get 50% of the rise when you sell. So if you kind of bought someone at 4.5 and they go up to 4.7, you would get 4.6. If they go up to 4.8, you would still get 4.6. So the way you've got to look at this is that as you build team value throughout the season, if you do manage to find like that 4 million golden defender that plays every game and rises to 4.6 quickly, it's a difficult sell a lot of the time unless, they're injured or dropped, because you've got kind of a value tied up in them. I think it's a nice option to have for when you want to potentially wildcard and bench boost later in the season to try and get to like a 105 million team value from the starting 100 million. But I think my biggest thing I was saying is you want to have a team structure, and you can go back to that timestamp as well, where you can easily move between assets. So where there's like 8 million midfielders and there's loads of them, 8 of them that look great, having at least 2 of them, it gives you the versatility to move to them quickly if the one you buy on the first game week is the wrong one. So I think that's the main thing to look out for here with team value, is a 0.1 change is a 0.5 change between game week 1 and game week 2, because it stops you from buying players at the same price. And that's why I like the kind of 2 premium, 1 mid, 1 attacker option, because I can always move to any asset in the game in one move. And I like to start game week 1 with a lot of flexibility. I guess what else have we said? So there's obviously price change prediction sites. I'm going to try use less of them this year. I was using FPL stats and statistics and fantasy football fix for this. But I do find that sometimes I find myself moving based on price changes that may not even happen. And I've come to the conclusion that there's always going to be another asset, and there's just so much more information waiting for the press conferences and soaking up the quotes from the managers. They can be quite telling. So I'm going to try and look less at price changes, although historically I've been aggressive in the first 10 weeks to raise team value. I'm going to just try to avoid that. But there will be a transfer trend segment next season again, and you'll get to hear me rant about the top 5 and top most sold and most bought players.
I can't wait to hear you rant that you've missed a price rise.
No, I'll be ranting about like, why have 200,000 people sold a player who was banned in the game week that's just gone live, who's then not banned in the game week they're selling him for, but they kept him for the banned game week. And then you get to the end of the game week, and that same player, let's say Antonio, for instance, has 700k transfers in. So God knows, and it happened earlier when Simicast was dropped. He rose in price on like the Monday, and then he dropped in price on the Friday. And I was like, this is sweet. I could sell for that profit for the morons who bought him after we knew he was going to be dropped the next game. But yeah, I think it's all about identifying value opportunities early on and finding the assets that are going to skyrocket quickly and moving to them. Thank you so much, William. Really appreciate that. Super thanks. Honestly, like you don't know how much that means to us. And last week, I think it was someone actually who watched back the video on demand. They sent us super thanks, which we didn't see live. So I don't know who that was, but if you're watching, like, please do message us. I'd love to say thanks personally. It means a lot to us. We've only just got over 10 members on the YouTube for the monthly subscription. So, it's a big thing.
We
like
are content. But we are content creators. We are content creators, remember.
We are. And you are the best FPL YouTuber by rank, factually speaking. Yeah, it's going to go. So let's get to the live questions. And while you guys get a few questions in, I'm going to just answer some of the questions that came through on Twitter earlier. But do please get any final questions you have as we start to wrap up the show. I'll answer 2 or 3 from Twitter first. As always, thanks so much. We've got to over 30 likes now. But please do like if you haven't already. It really helps the channel grow. Hit subscribe if you're new, and hit that bell so you know about when we're going live for the rest of the preseason content. So FPL Point Break on Twitter, Andrew. This is a bit of a more joke question. Yes, he wanted to know, is anyone here tempted to name their team Net That Haul this season? I said it should be you, Mariner.
No, the Brothers Grimsby's having another run at the top 100.
We also have a maker with the foundation.
But now, hang on a second. What we could do, though, is we could auction that one for charity.
We could. It could be one of the
I can't change my name because it's locked, because I apparently I put in something offensive. So my account might be deleted by FPL.
Oh, I see.
Really? You're offensive again, Gabe. What is it about Harvey Barnes?
No, they just rename you. Change name.
No,
they change your name.
There's a warning that came out that said, if offensive names, your account might be deleted. Apparently, do not name your team Huang like Dendonker. Not good, I guess.
Their algorithm's getting smarter about a day. So FPLJ asks, sun or no sun? I guess we'll get to the midfielders in the future episodes. But what I would recommend FPLJ is, if you're watching back, go to the team structure section, because there was a free premium mid structure that had Son, Salah, Haaland, and you'll get our thoughts on that there. Thank you, Charles FPL, who said the dream team of FPL content creators. Gaudy ranking numbers and even better personalities. That's very kind. FPL Sherlock Dylan on Twitter said, how important is a good bench for this season? Can we afford to have bench fodder, or should we keep a decent bench? Just to answer that, I think if Andreas does move from United, having a starting 4.5 million mid who's going to play that Carvalho role behind Mitrovic, that's a great first bench. Greenwood, 4.5 million forward. He had a lot of minutes off the bench for Leeds with 5 subs. I expect it to go up as he grows in age. Another great bench option to have. I think with the way the season's fallen, with the kind of the wild card, the unlimited transfers, and then the next wild card, as I said, I see the season in 4 chunks. And for me, I'd rather attack and have all my money on the pitch for the first few weeks. We have Akib asks a question. I'll answer this next week because God knows what you were thinking. He asked Zimmer from Bournemouth or Nathan Patterson from Everton. We'll come to that when we look at the deep dives of positions. FPL Robots, thoughts on Trossard. So I would say go back to the matchups, hear about Brighton and what we think about them. I like Trossard personally. I'm not convinced at the start of the season he's my go-to guy. I don't really like any of the mids under 8 million. I don't see much there. And in the same vein, FPL Raul asks, best possible mid in the 6.5 to 7.5 region. I would recommend on FPL Salah's feed, he's put a list of the best players from each price point where there's more than one player, and he does it for each position. For mids, he has Odegaard at 6.5, Grealish, Rafinha, Zaha at 7, and Sancho at 7.5. I'd sneak in Rashford at 6.5 if he somehow goes back to his old ways. But as I say, I don't see much value there. And a final question from Raul, I'll leave this to one of you guys. Robertson or James/Chilwell? I assume this is a double up with Trent versus not having the double up and buying a Chelsea defender instead. What do you guys think about that one, having looked at the fixture blocks?
James Robertson or James or Chilwell? I think I'm tended to probably go towards the Chelsea option, I think, although I'm a bit worried about Rudiger. Only because I think I probably like the idea of that second midfielder for Liverpool. So I think again it depends on how you're thinking about the rest of your team. But I mean, Gabe, you could go the opposite to me. You could go on double Liverpool, right?
I think I would go double Liverpool. I think if Trent is kind of like unmissable value at 7.5, Robbo at 7.0 is equally obvious. I think so.
He's good, isn't he?
He's good.
He's a good pick. He's a good pick.
Yeah, and Chelsea, I just don't know how they're going to be defensively. We have to remember they weren't great in the second half of last season defensively, losing Rudiger, losing Christensen. I don't know. I just prefer the sure thing that Robbo will play basically every match. So not quite, but but he will.
Chilwell might suffer with a bit of rotation to start with as well, right? Particularly given the fact he's coming back from a long-term injury as well. There was a question at 518, Nima, on Chilwell as well. Chilwell and James. So
do you want to do that?
I will. I'm just looking at it now. Hang on a second. There we go. Here we go. So it's Cheyenne. Chilwell or James. So I think if I was going with that at this moment in time because of injury, I would go with James. But what about you guys?
I really want Chilwell. I think before he got he
fully
was
fit.
Fantastic.
I know he's great.
Yeah.
His numbers are amazing, but I'm just a bit worried about his minutes.
He's coming back from a long-term injury, though, right?
He is. He should, but it's been a while. It's what, 10 months, 11 months now.
Yeah,
that's
maybe
plenty of time to recover. And
full preseason.
What I worry about James is, will Tuchel continue to play him at right center back on occasion?
I think the move to back four as well, if and when that happens, it might change our perception on these guys a lot.
Yeah,
true. That's why I'm not keen on the double up. But I would like to start the season with one of them. Let's go to Andy Martin's question. We'll go through these questions we have in the live chat and get out of here. So he's got currently Fulham, Forest and Bournemouth as the three teams to get relegated in his predicted table. Should we stay clear of their assets and target them more, like I guess from an attacking point of view? So buy players or captain players that play against them. And he does think, do they perform worse after initial enthusiasm? So do they maybe start off hot from a return to the Premier League and then fall off potentially? Personally, like I think apart from like bench options, I hate to say it, there isn't really any of their assets I'm interested in. I know Mitrovic could sneak back into discussion after breaking the championship records, but I'm with Andy on this. I can't see myself going near them in my game week 1 team personally. Like apart from obviously Andreas as a bench fodder, but that's pretty much it. I think for me,
I'll be targeting them.
I'll be targeting them, which is why I'm starting with Haaland, because I want to have Haaland for that fixture against Bournemouth in game week 2. I do like Andy thinking of starting with De Bruyne from City instead, and maybe Kane. That's a really exciting shout. Obviously, Kane is cheaper than some this year and has penalties. And I'll get onto Haaland more later because there is a question about him. Sham says we generally make a team that seats for the first 2 game weeks and then use 2 free transfer game week 3, right? So I think this is generally right. I do like the idea of a mini wildcard in game week 3 with a -4. It is a nice option to have, but you never know what's going to happen. So that's why I still like having the flexible team that if something does go wrong, someone gets suspended or injured, you do still want to be able to move in one free transfer to almost any asset at least there's got to be assets in that price range. You don't want assets where there's no one near them. If you're starting a 5 million mid every week, like Dewsbury Hall, as you were saying from Leicester, Mariner, and he gets injured, you don't really have any options to go to from there without a hit. So that's my thinking. But you got to also think about team value to an extent. I know I said I don't want to look at price rises, but a couple of seasons back when there was the unique situation of Man United having a blank in game week 1, I do recall taking a -4 in game week 2 to buy Bruno. So it kind of depends. Like, I think it is okay to be aggressive with the early wildcard we have and maybe try to do something different if you spot an opportunity to do something that has value. Another question from Shabs. Wilson fits the scenario best. So we have him for the first 2, and then we sell him for Jesus, Tony, Havertz, Antonio, who then have the better fixtures. It's not a bad shout. Newcastle, Wilson. I think just based on what we saw in the Newcastle matchups before, I'm not so keen on their attack myself. I'd rather wait and see. I feel like he'd be a differential pick, but like you only maybe like for me, I'd only have 2 or 3 players like this in my game week 1 team.
I'll tell you one thing about this though, and you know me, I don't like Callum Wilson. He's probably my nemesis. Probably Gabe's got Harvey Barnes and most of the Spurs team, whereas I've got Callum Wilson. Callum Wilson always starts quick. He always starts quick. He always scores in the first few weeks. Then he gets injured. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't discount it quite so quickly.
I think Callum is an interesting pick, but what I will say about this kind of this approach is it's a little bit too specific to start the season.
You're locking a move in.
Yep, we know so little at this point in the season. We're going to learn a lot in the first 2 game weeks that it could just having such a narrow approach, I think, could hurt you.
Absolutely. Remember what I say. You learn 50% in game week 2, 33% in game week 3, 25% in game week 4, 20% in game week 5, 15% in game week 6. Mm-hmm. That's how that's the right way. Yeah, I agree with Gabe completely. Have you got any others there? I've got one
so
here.
We've got one from James. I'll just go through the starred ones you've started. So James 98, similar one, but it includes Watkins here as well. So going Watkins or Wilson over Jesus and banking that money to see how Jesus gets on and where he plays and what happens with Nketiah. Does he play up front, for instance? I don't think it's a bad shout. I think depending on the team structure, it might be an option you're forced into. I think a lot of teams with Salah and Haaland, they won't be able to afford a Jesus if they're also going big at the back. So I think for those kind of teams where you want to have more expensive assets in your back line, then it's an option. As someone who's not going to have a very expensive back line personally, it's not for me. I'm biased as an Arsenal fan. I kind of just want Jesus. But Shams, positional swaps, Kulusevski, Mahrez, Saka, Maddison if necessary. Yes, I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, you want players in a similar price point so you can just move between them. That's what we were kind of saying. But that's why I'm considering finding a way to get to 2 8 million mids. I don't like my current draft that has an 8 million mid and then 7 million in Grealish. If Grealish goes wrong, there isn't many options there for me. Do you want to guys take on this one from Neha about the Leicester defense and if it's gone under the radar? We can talk about the wing backs. We've got obviously Justin, Ricardo, Castagna as well. They had a huge injuries to their backline last season. This season, they won't have any European ties. Does that make them more appealing for either of you, or is it a wait and see for you?
Leicester-wise, just looking at their fixtures now. Early doors, they're more appeal as a rotation from the perspective of getting an attack in return, I think. So I think if you're looking for someone like Justin or someone like that, or Castagna at 4, they're both 4.5. Did you say, Nima?
I think so, yeah. I think they're all pretty cheap.
Yeah, I mean, maybe for rotation from that perspective. I'm not so sure about clean sheets, but, they might get an attack in return. I wouldn't discount them. I wouldn't discount them at all.
I think for me, this is the most exciting time of the season, and I wouldn't get too wedded to any players. In fact, once you've done 1 or 2 drafts, I would actually probably stop now. Personally, I think this is the most exciting time for research. You don't want to get into a scenario where you've made so many drafts that when the season starts, every single player that scores, you're like, oh, I had them in my team at some point. What a bad start. It's not a good mindset to go into and risk going on tilt. No. I prefer to use this period to look at preseason, look at formation and strategy changes, look at signings that come in, read lots of content, and not just FPL content. Like I love the content on The Athletic, deep dives, interviews, look at stats, just start to just enjoy the slow return to the Premier League and get an idea of how things will go.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do exactly the same as you. I'm not going to do another draft now till I get back into Singapore in a couple of weeks' time. But I'm going to plug it. I'm going to plug this because I've got 2 chapters in and I'm really enjoying it. Raptors book. I'm actually going to read Raptors psychology book on FPL. I brought it with me. And I'm going to sit.
I never thought you were going to read. Gabe tried for a whole year.
I'm going to read that book. I'm going to. Well, I can't drink, can I? So I've got to read.
You got to do something to pass this. I know.
So I'm going to read a book. See if that changes my perception on FPL for a season. There we go.
I like that. He's a good guy as well, and great content. On that note, before the next question, I just want to say a quick shout out to Above Average as well. Coming in with the Zoth strapline. Good morning, afternoon, evening, gentlemen and ladies. I will have to go back and check out your show. I hear some of the guys here were on that live stream, then they were on this live stream, and some hardcore veteran, hungry people for FPL out there.
I'm gonna listen to it later. I like it. That's the one.
So let's go to William's question. Let's go to Williams because this does talk about Haaland a bit, but also how it will affect De Bruyne and is he a forgotten asset? I think the fact that he came in $500,000 cheaper than De Bruyne, that's what was very exciting. And I think a lot of the time when De Bruyne was scoring last year, it was because they were playing without a recognized striker. So he would be relied on to run into the box and take those last man shots, late runner shots. I do wonder, this is the first time that City are going to play with a recognized striker in years. And I do wonder if that means that De Bruyne may not be as far forward for those goal scoring opportunities. I think he'll get more assists because, as we saw, there was many games where he should have hauled silly and there was no one there who could convert. So that's one thing. But just on Haaland, what I want to say is, there's a lot of talk about his injuries and stuff like that. What I really like about both Haaland and Salah is neither of them have the World Cup. And on top of that, Pep really wants to win the Champions League. If he's going to change his entire system to play with a true striker for the first time in years, he's going to want to play Haaland as much as possible before the World Cup, knowing he's going to get a full rest so that the team can get used to the change in system. So when they get to the knockouts of the Champions League, it's not that they're still learning on the job. So for me personally, I think with that 1 month break for Haaland and having the provider and KDB there behind him, I'm super excited to have him. And even if he gets subbed early, 60, 70 minutes, because of the 5 subs, I see that as a positive because it gives me more confidence he will start most games. And City are going to be the team that are the most likely to score the most goals. So just kind of, having him for 60 minutes against Bournemouth as my captain, that's very appealing anyway. But there's nothing wrong with De Bruyne. I just think with that pricing and the fact that he's unlikely to be on penalties, 12 million is a lot for me to be asked of for someone who might be playing further back. Do you guys want to have anything to say on De Bruyne specifically before we move on?
I think if I was going to pick between De Bruyne and Salah, I think I would go Salah purely on EO. So that then points me at Haaland. I'm sorry, I'm a bit boring.
We can always take the risks later, right? I just don't want to get left behind. That's the key thing. There's an interesting point. Yeah.
Holland will probably be on pens.
That's what I'm thinking. They'll want to get him off the counter quick. So that seems like a good asset. Nehal makes a very good point. Murmurs of Kepa and Mendy rotating because Kepa wants consistent game time. I don't know what will happen there, but it's worth keeping in mind. Obviously, Mendy at 5 million seems a steal, but with the chance to wildcard early, I can get him if he's playing consistently and getting clean sheets. Andy Martin, I looked this one up for you. What's an alternative phrase for skinning a cat? So we can stop Mariner to say it. So we have a few. There are more than one way to cook an egg. There's more than one way to crack an egg. There's more than one way to peel an orange, and all roads lead to Rome. So I'll leave you with that. How can you not love Callum Wilson? We definitely love the truth, Callum Wilson. Any final bits? We have starting without Haaland could be suicidal. Yes, so he's currently higher owned than Salah, as per the FPL update. Nehal does say Ricardo, Castagna, and Justin are all 4.5. Definitely wants to watch. And yeah, I agree, James. City could already be 5-0 up by the time he's subbed. There is Alvarez who can play over Mahrez. That makes me not want to get Mahrez in Game Week 1. That's all it really does for me. But I think that's kind of everything for today.
I just need to make a point. Who was it? The person who trolled me about Mahrez the other week? Who was it?
I can't remember. I think
my comment on Twitter was, "Are you taking the piss?"
Well, Mahrez definitely stopped you from winning FPL. That's for sure. It might have happened without that. Don't use I'm glad you didn't use the live FPL what if machine before they deleted last season's data. You might not have been able to live with that information had you known. But yeah, let's get us out of here. Thanks everyone for tuning in and watching live at this late hour or early hour in the East. Had a great time. We're going to go really deep dive into the positions, as I was saying, in the next few episodes. So goalkeepers and defenders next week. We'll announce the scheduled time soon. And just obviously, please support the channel. Hit like, hit subscribe. If you want to get the data when the season starts early, We're going to be releasing the kind of the FDRs and the Captaincy Metric 48 hours before the show. So become a YouTube member. We're going to add a few different price points. So I think we've got the $1.99 at the moment. We're going to add a $4.99 and maybe a slightly more expensive one. Really, we want to kind of grow the community. So I am looking to create a Discord for everyone here, for all the haulers. And it'll be a place where you can keep in contact with us and chat throughout the week outside the episodes. But if there's anything else you'd like to see as part of the membership, do let us know. Hit us up on Spotify, Apple, leave some reviews on there if you've not done so before. And really just great to see everyone. And we'll see Mr. 122nd OR, number one FPL YouTube content creator next week. But
no, you won't. No, you won't.
We'll go without you. You don't want to be there for goalkeepers and defenders.
No, I'm bored. Goalkeeper's boring.
You'll be back for midfielders and strikers, I'm sure.
I will. Yeah, I will.
See you soon. Take care.
See you guys. Take care. Bye-bye.